throwaway because family knows my main. I, female, 29, am honestly sitting here shaking right now, trying to figure out if I'm crazy or if my family is. So I've always been the responsible one in my family. Like, always. I started working when I was 16 at this crappy ice cream place in our town. We're from Ohio, and have basically been working nonstop since then. I put myself through state college with minimal loans, like $15 total, which I paid off last year actually, and moved to Atlanta 4 years ago for a marketing job that's actually pretty decent. I have an emergency fund, contribute to my 401k, the whole adult thing. I'm not saying this to brag at all, just to give context for what's happening. My brother Will, male, 26, is the complete opposite. He's never kept a job for more than like 4 to 5 months, ever. First, he was going to be this craft beer entrepreneur, also known as he bought some home brewing equipment that sat in our parents' garage for 8 months. Then he was a day trader, lost like $3,000 of money our parents gave him. Now he's calling himself a social media consultant, which as far as I can tell means he posts on Instagram a lot. He literally lives in our parents' basement still. My dad, Robert, male, 58, makes every excuse in the book for Will. He's just like I was at his age. No, Dad, you had a mortgage and a child at his age. Traditional jobs stifle his creativity. He's networking with important people. It's been this way our whole lives. Will could do no wrong, and I was just expected to take care of myself. My mom, Caroline, female, 56, tries to be the peacekeeper, but honestly, she makes things worse sometimes. Anytime there's conflict, she tells me to be the bigger person, because that's just how your father is, and Will needs more support than you do. It's exhausting. Anyway, my grandmother, my dad's mom, passed away about 3 months ago. We were really close. She was basically the only one who ever really saw me, you know? When my dad missed my school events because he was at Will's whatever, Grandma Ruth would be there. She taught me to sew and would tell me she was proud of how independent I was. She was amazing. In her will, she specifically left me $75,000. Not my parents, not the family, specifically me. I've been saving for a house down payment for years, and the Atlanta market is crazy expensive, so this inheritance would finally make it possible for me to buy something small but decent. Here's where everything blew up. Will recently got engaged to Candace, female, 25, who supposedly comes from this super wealthy Connecticut family, but is mysteriously estranged from them. Red flag much. Even though Will is between jobs again, they're planning this ridiculous wedding at some historic mansion that would cost like $60,000. So Sunday night, I'm prepping for this huge work presentation, totally stressed, when my dad calls. He asked how I was planning to use the inheritance money, but called it Mom's money. I corrected him that Grandma Ruth specifically left it to me in her will. He got dismissive and said it was still family money. Then he told me Will and Candace found their perfect venue, but needed to put a deposit down by Friday. When I told him I was planning to use the money for a house down payment, my dad got really angry. He said I've always been selfish and that Will is starting his life. I tried explaining the money was important for my future and that Grandma Ruth knew that. My dad insisted Grandma would want me to help my brother start his marriage right because she was all about family, which is total BS because she was always telling me to be financially independent. I tried to compromise and offered $1,000 as a wedding gift, which I thought was really generous considering I've never asked my family for anything while Will has been bankrolled his entire life. Dad completely lost it. He said he would fund the wedding himself and that I wasn't welcome at family gatherings until I made this right. Then he hung up on me. The next day, my mom called crying, saying I should compromise to keep peace in the family. Her idea of compromise, give Will just $30,000 and keep the rest. That's not a compromise. That's highway robbery. Then my Aunt Jean, Dad's sister, called to tell me I was being selfish and that's not how we raised you. She didn't raise me at all, so what the frick. My cousin Rebecca texted me privately saying she thinks I'm right, but she won't say anything to my dad because she doesn't want to get involved. Thanks for the support, I guess. It's been 3 weeks of no contact with my dad. I saw on Facebook that they had a family dinner last weekend that I wasn't invited to. I honestly feel sick about the whole thing. Am I crazy here? Am I really being selfish? Part of me wonders if I'm just bitter about how Will has always been the golden child, and that's clouding my judgment. But also, it's my inheritance. from my grandmother, who specifically left it to me. Now, for the first update, my family is pressuring me to give my brother my inheritance for his wedding. Dad has cut me off for refusing. First of all, thank you to everyone who commented on my last post. Honestly, wasn't expecting that many responses and definitely cried reading through them. Having strangers validate that I'm not crazy was more helpful than you can imagine. So it's been about 2 months since everything blew up with my family over Grandma Ruth's inheritance money. A lot has happened, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around it all. Quick recap. My brother Will, male, 26, wanted me to use my $75,000 inheritance from our grandmother to pay for his expensive wedding to Candace, female, 25. I refused because I was saving for a house down payment. My dad Robert, male, 58, basically disowned me over it, and my mom Caroline, female, 56, kept begging me to compromise by giving Will just $30. So, the wedding happened last weekend at this fancy historic place called Oakwood Estate. Costs like $15 just for the venue. Mom's been texting me occasionally with updates while still telling me I should apologize to Dad. Dad took out a second mortgage on their house and pulled about $45,000 from his retirement account to pay for this wedding. The whole thing ended up costing around $65,000. They had like 180 guests, a 5-tier cake, premium open bar, and some wedding planner who usually works with local celebrities. Meanwhile, I've been focusing on my own life. I found a perfect little starter condo close to my office, used my inheritance as the down payment, and I'm closing next month. Also, I landed a huge client at work and got a small promotion. I tried to be the bigger person and sent a card with a small gift to Will and Candace, even though I wasn't invited to the wedding. The unopened package came back in the mail a week later with "refused" written across it in what I'm 99.9% sure is my dad's handwriting. Yesterday, Mom called me crying. Will and Candace were supposed to come back from their honeymoon in the Maldives. Yes, an overwater bungalow that Dad also paid for, 3 days ago, but they never showed up for the welcome home dinner Mom had prepared. Dad couldn't reach them, phones going straight to voicemail, no response to texts or emails. Their social media has been silent since they posted a pic boarding their flight 2 weeks ago. I was worried something had happened to them. But then Mom called again today with more news. She was crying so hard, I kept having to ask her to repeat herself. Mom finally told me that Dad discovered a bunch of unauthorized charges on his credit card. When I asked how much, she just said tens of thousands, but didn't know the exact amount. I asked if they called the police, and she said Dad refuses because it would destroy Will's future. I suggested maybe it was identity theft, but then Mom revealed that Dad found emails in Will's old computer that proved it was 100% deliberate. When I asked about Candace's involvement, Mom told me that Candace's family cut her off years ago for similar behavior. So that explains the whole mysteriously estranged from her wealthy family situation. They knew she had financial fraud in her past and still let Will marry her. The damage is way worse than I initially thought. Will apparently maxed out 3 credit cards Dad had co-signed for him years ago, $28,000, emptied a joint account that Dad kept with him for emergencies, $13,500, forged Dad's signature on some loan document from one of those sketchy high-interest lenders, $35,000, and they think he might have used Dad's personal info to open new lines of credit. They're still figuring that part out. We're talking about $95,000 in debt on top of the wedding and honeymoon expenses. I can't even process this. Dad texted me this morning saying he hopes I'm happy now. He said, if I had helped with the wedding, Will wouldn't have needed to do this, and that he needs my help with these debts. I haven't responded. He's still blaming me for Will's actions. Will is a 26-year-old man who chose to commit fraud against his own parents. I don't even know how I feel. Grandma Ruth always saw through Will's behavior. There's a reason she left the money specifically to me, but I'm also worried about my parents. Mom said Dad's landscaping business might be in trouble because he can't get some business loan he needed due to his credit being destroyed now, and they might have to sell the family home. But housing prices in their area have dropped recently. This all reminds me of when Will borrowed $3,000 from me 3 years ago for emergency car repairs and promised to pay me back within 2 months. Never mentioned it again, but somehow had enough money to buy a new gaming system the next month. I was such an idiot for believing him. I honestly don't know what to do. Part of me wants to maintain my boundaries, especially with Dad still blaming me in his text. But I'm worried about Mom. She's caught in the middle of all this and sounds completely broken. Am I being cold-hearted if I don't help them? Should I just keep focusing on my own life? I worked so hard to be financially responsible, and now I feel like I'm being punished for it. Edit. Holy crap, this blew up overnight. Thank you all for the responses. To answer some common questions, no, I definitely won't be giving them any money. The inheritance is already being used for my condo down payment, and I'm not taking out a loan to fix my dad's poor decisions. I was more wondering if I should help Mom in other ways, emotional support, helping her figure out next steps, etc. Several people asked if Will and Candace actually got legally married. Yes, they did. Mom sent me pictures of the ceremony, still didn't invite me though. To the person who asked if I could press charges myself, no, I can't. The fraud was committed against my dad, not me. He would have to be the one to report it. Now for the second update. So it's been about 3 months since my last update, and holy crap, has a lot happened. I don't even know where to start. First, thanks for all the supportive comments on my last post. You guys were right about so many things. Quick catch up for anyone who doesn't remember. My grandma left me $75. My brother Will wanted it for his wedding. My dad Robert disowned me when I refused. They went ahead with the $65 wedding anyway, plus honeymoon in the Maldives. And then Will and his new wife Candace disappeared after committing like $95 in credit card fraud/identity theft against my parents. Dad somehow still blamed me for it all. So anyway, I moved into my new condo, used the inheritance as my down payment, like I planned from the beginning. It's nothing fancy, but it's mine, and that feels pretty amazing. I've been painting the walls myself to save money. Turns out I'm terrible at painting, and even started growing some herbs on my tiny balcony, something Grandma Ruth taught me to do when I was little. Okay, so about Will and Candace. We finally found out where they went. One of Will's former co-workers from that social media job he quit after like 3 months messaged my mom because he saw them at some resort in Costa Rica, of all places. We were all like, what the frick? So I did some digging. Honestly, I'm still pretty good at internet stalking from my college days, and found they have new social media accounts under slightly different names. Get this, they're documenting their digital nomad lifestyle and entrepreneurial journey. Eye roll, while posting pics of beachfront rental places, fancy restaurants, and tourist stuff. They even started a vlog about leaving the corporate rat race, which is hilarious because neither of them has ever held an actual job for more than a few months. And there's literally zero mention of family or any plans to come back. My dad finally filed a police report after weeks of my mom begging him to, but the cops basically said prosecuting them internationally would be super expensive with no guarantee it would work. So they're just getting away with it, I guess. Meanwhile, my dad's whole life has completely fallen apart. Their house went into pre-foreclosure after he missed like 3 mortgage payments. He had to sell most of his landscaping equipment to pay urgent bills, which means his business is basically done. My mom moved in with my Aunt Jean temporarily because they couldn't even afford their utility bills anymore. And their marriage is like on the rocks. Apparently my dad hid how bad things were for weeks, and my mom only found out when the electricity got shut off. She was understandably pissed. So last week, I get this call from an unknown number at like 11:30 p.m. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to pick up. It was my dad, sobbing. Like I've maybe seen my dad cry twice in my entire life, and this was full-on sobbing. His first words were literally, "Are you happy now that we're losing everything?" Classic dad, still trying to blame me somehow. I just stayed quiet, because honestly, what the frick am I supposed to say to that? The weirdest thing happened when I didn't respond. His tone completely shifted from angry to just desperate. He told me he was staying at some budget inn because he couldn't face my mom's family. I finally asked him why he was calling me after months of silence. That's when he completely broke down. I'm talking crying harder than I've ever heard from him. Not even when Grandma Ruth died. He kept having to stop to catch his breath between sobs. And then he said something I never thought I'd hear. He admitted he always favored Will because Will reminded him of himself when he was younger. He said he ignored countless red flags about Will's behavior over the years. The most shocking part, he said Grandma Ruth had explicitly warned him about Will's financial irresponsibility multiple times over the years, but he dismissed her concerns as old-fashioned thinking, his words. And then he told me I was right, and he was catastrophically wrong. I was so shocked. Never in my life did I expect to hear those words from my dad. I told him I needed time to think and wasn't going to make any promises right then. After I hung up, I called my therapist. Yes, I finally started therapy after many of you suggested it in my last post, and we talked about how to set boundaries while still helping. 3 days later, I met him at a coffee shop near my condo. Honestly, he looked like he'd aged 10 years. His hair was unwashed, and I'm pretty sure he was wearing the same clothes from when he called me. He immediately started apologizing again for how he treated me. I acknowledged it, but asked him directly what he wanted from me. He hesitated for a long time and then admitted he didn't know how to fix his situation. I suggested we walk over to see my new condo. This was the first time he'd seen where I live. When we got there, he just looked around at what I'd accomplished. Like I said, it's nothing fancy, but it's clean and well-maintained and mine. He broke down crying again, this is becoming a pattern, and said I'd made the right choice while he destroyed everything. That's when I offered to let him stay in my spare bedroom temporarily and help him navigate the debt situation. He tried to hug me, but I stepped back and explained there would be strict conditions. He nodded and said he'd accept any terms I set. My conditions were: 1. He could stay for a maximum of 2 months while looking for employment. 2. He had to attend financial counseling and therapy for his enabling behavior. 3. He'd have to accept a legally documented loan with structured repayment, even if it's just $50 a month. 4. He'd need to publicly acknowledge to our extended family that I was right about Will and the inheritance. 5. He had to support my decision to maintain zero contact with Will and Candace. So that's the current situation. My dad has been staying in my guest room for about 2 weeks now. He's going to therapy twice a week at this community center. It's sliding scale, so he can afford it. He's working at a garden center making like $14 an hour, and I'm helping him negotiate with creditors and looking into bankruptcy options. My mom visits occasionally, but she's still really upset and hurt. She seems lost, honestly. My Aunt Jean, who, if you remember, was one of the people who called me selfish for not giving Will the money, actually called to apologize after seeing how my dad is trying to change. This whole inheritance thing basically showed what everyone's really like. Will being selfish, my dad always taking his side, my mom avoiding conflict, and me just trying to stand my ground. The relationship with my dad is different now. Not fully healed by any means, but we're having more honest conversations than we've had my entire life. Oh, and the weirdest part, while helping my dad organize what few documents he still has, we found a letter from Grandma Ruth that he never opened. It explicitly stated she left the money to me because she's the only one who understands its value. I never imagined I'd be using my grandmother's money to help my dad rebuild his life from my guest room, but it feels right somehow. I think Grandma Ruth would probably approve.